What if makeup was never about beauty at all, but about survival, fear, and the need to be seen by forces larger than ourselves? Long before mirrors existed, humans marked their faces in darkness, not to impress, but to protect, to signal belonging, to feel less alone against an unpredictable world watching back. In the earliest human gatherings, paint was not decoration, but intention. Pigment drawn from earth and ash turned skin into a message, visible even from afar. A painted face could warn, invite, intimidate, or ask for mercy, shaping how others reacted before a single sound was made. It decided safety or danger. Early humans lived among constant threats, and the body became a canvas for courage. Darkened eyes mimicked predators. Red-stained skin echoed blood and vitality. These markings blurred the line between human and animal, helping wearers feel stronger, more terrifying, and less vulnerable when stepping into moments that could decide life. Makeup also worked as protection, both physical and unseen. Clays cooled skin beneath harsh suns, oils shielded against insects. Smoke-darkened pigments repelled glare. But beyond practicality, these layers felt like armor, a belief that the body, once marked, stood guarded, not just from nature but from misfortune and unseen judgment. In tribes, paint created belonging before language ever could. Shared symbols across faces turned individuals into something larger, a unit that moved, hunted, and survived together. To be unpainted was to be exposed. Separate, suspicious. Color and pattern quietly answered the most dangerous question early humans faced: who is one of us? Spiritual meaning soon settled into these markings. Faces were transformed for rituals, meant to speak to forces beyond human control. Lines and colors mapped stories of ancestors, spirits, and gods, turning skin into a bridge between worlds. Makeup became a way to be recognized by the invisible, to be heard without words. In moments of fear, makeup offered courage borrowed from belief. War paint hardened expressions, erased hesitation, and made death feel less personal. When a face changed, the self changed with it. The painted warrior was not just protected by pigment, but by the story that the pigment promised. As societies grew, makeup quietly signaled power. Certain colors marked leadership, others obedience. Access to rare pigments separated the influential from the ordinary. A painted face could command attention or submission before authority was spoken aloud. Long before crowns or uniforms, pigment announced who mattered and who was expected to listen. Children learned these meanings early, watching elders transform themselves before important moments. The act of painting taught patience, reverence, and identity. It was never random. Each stroke carried memory and expectation, reminding the wearer of their place within a story already unfolding long before they were born. Across distant lands, humans who never met still reached for color. Different symbols emerged, yet the impulse remained the same. To alter the face was to prepare the self. Makeup became a shared human instinct, a silent agreement that the unmarked body was incomplete when facing moments that truly mattered. Even joy required transformation. Celebrations, unions, and seasonal rituals all demanded painted skin. Makeup did not hide emotion. It amplified it. Grief darkened the face. Triumph brightened it. Color allowed feelings to exist outside the body, visible to others, shared, acknowledged, and understood without explanation. Over time, faces carried more than protection or prayer. They carried stories of self. Individuals began choosing markings that reflected personal experience, not just communal need. Subtle differences emerged, hinting that makeup could express individuality as much as unity, desire as much as duty. This shift was quiet, almost accidental. As survival stabilized, expression found space to breathe. Paint still held power, but it also began to reflect emotion, attraction, and self-perception. The face was no longer only a signal to the world, but a mirror turned inward. Makeup did not lose its ancient roots, it evolved. What once guarded against fear slowly began to speak of identity, choice, and selfhood. The same marks that called spirits and warned enemies started whispering personal stories, setting the stage for a transformation that would change how humans see themselves forever. It would continue shifting alongside trade, intimacy, mirrors, cities, and changing ideas of beauty, carrying echoes of ritual and survival, even as it moved closer to emotion, performance, and the deeply human desire not just to exist, but to be recognized, remembered, and intentionally shaped in the eyes of others. This slow transformation would blur lines between protection and expression, between collective meaning and private intention, until painted faces no longer answered only to spirits or danger, but to longing, curiosity, and the emerging sense of self that would define future societies. It marked the moment when adornment began turning inward, quietly preparing humanity for a new relationship with identity and meaning. As pigment turned inward, faces became social signals read instinctively by others nearby. Color and contour no longer spoke only to spirits or danger, but to acceptance, attraction, and rank. A marked face could invite closeness or distance, shaping how someone was treated before a voice entered the space, or a personal story was ever revealed, understood, or believed. Makeup began to sort people quietly, slipping into daily routines without announcement or ceremony. Certain looks suggested refinement, others excess. Some faces were expected to be adorned, others restrained. These unspoken rules settled into ordinary life, guiding behavior invisibly, rewarding those who blended correctly, and isolating those who failed to match the expected image. The face became a stage where belonging was rehearsed again and again. People learned which features to soften, which to exaggerate, which to hide entirely. Makeup offered the promise of fitting smoothly into shared expectations, easing the tension between inner feeling and outward presentation that many carried silently. Gender slipped into these rituals almost unnoticed, carried by repetition rather than decree. Some faces were encouraged to display softness, others strength. Paint emphasized difference, reinforcing stories about who should be visible, who should be gentle, and who should remain controlled, contained, or diminished. Class and power followed closely behind, etched into technique, access, and refinement. Time, materials, and attention became signals of stability and worth. A polished face suggested discipline and security, even when the reality beneath the surface was uncertain, precarious, or quietly unraveling. Yet within these constraints, makeup also carried rebellion. A face altered against expectation unsettled observers. Bold lines, exaggerated shapes, or deliberate absence disrupted the quiet agreements holding social order together, turning appearance into a subtle form of resistance and refusal. Performance entered daily life and stayed there. Faces learned to switch roles depending on setting, emotion, or audience. One version appeared for safety, another for intimacy, another for authority. Makeup allowed the self to be edited, rehearsed, and adjusted without explanation. This flexibility made makeup both powerful and exhausting. It offered control in uncertain environments, letting people shape how they were perceived when outcomes felt unpredictable. At the same time, it demanded vigilance, an ongoing awareness of how the face was being read, judged, and interpreted. Some used makeup to disappear, rather than stand out. Neutrality became its own disguise, softening features until they passed unnoticed. Invisibility could feel like protection, especially in spaces where attention carried risk, rather than comfort, kindness, or reward. Others used it to claim space deliberately and visibly. Color and contrast pulled the gaze forward, insisting on recognition. For those long overlooked, paint became a way to announce presence, to state, without words, that they existed, endured, and mattered. During moments of collective uncertainty, faces returned to paint with renewed intensity. When identities felt unstable, the face became a place to anchor meaning even temporarily. Makeup offered familiarity when the surrounding world shifted too quickly to grasp. This return was rarely conscious or carefully reasoned. Hands reached for familiar motions, familiar textures, familiar reflections. The act itself steadied the mind, creating order through repetition, turning the face into something recognizable again. Makeup never fully belonged to one purpose or meaning. It moved between armor and invitation, discipline and freedom, concealment and revelation. Its power came from this instability. Mirroring the contradictions held inside every human life and social structure, humans still paint their faces because the face remains the first place uncertainty appears, and the first place we try to answer it. In pigment and shadow, we practice becoming ourselves again, leaving traces of intention on skin, hoping someone, even briefly, understands who we are meant to be.